Hello everyone, CDNet here with another video from the Avalanche ecosystem, and today I've got another very special guest. Today we are going to be talking about how to get a job within Ava Labs, and I have Dani Schlarmann, who is Chief Nerd Herder, or at least Nerd Herder at Ava Labs. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Very excited to speak with you and obviously speak about something that one I'm very passionate about and something I do every day.
Yeah, I mean, let's just get straight into it. I'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself. What's your background? Like, how did you come to work for Ava Labs? What's your experience in Web3?
Awesome. Yeah, no. So just general overview from like Web3 crypto standpoint. I've been in this space since about 2014. I was an Ethereum ICO investor. I started professionally working in the space around 2016. I was an external consultant as a recruiter for the IOTA Foundation, for Block One with EOS, IBM's Hyperledger Fabric when they were starting to build that, Visa when they were doing some blockchain implementation at the beginning, as well as Ford's autonomous driving division when they were trying to implement the Tangle. So I've been in and around the blockchain space, as well as some companies like Xpopulous as well.
It's a
Um,
great resume.
as a recruiter, I've been doing this for about 7 years. I've mostly stayed in like the early stage tech startup space as well as gaming. So externally, I've worked for like Dollar Shave Club, Acorns. I worked with Oculus before they got acquired by Facebook. Symantec, Western Digital, SanDisk, as well as like most of the major gaming companies I've worked with at one time. I worked internally at Daybreak, and I helped build PUBG for the United States. So
Wow.
I've been around, at least in the gaming industry and early stage tech. So coming to Ava Labs was definitely more of like a homecoming. I was very interested. I've always had a soft spot as well for DAGs. So directed acyclic graphs are kind of my jam. So when I knew that that was part of the consensus mechanism, like I was pretty stoked on that. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome, a great background, and I love also that a little bit of the technical part comes back through to the doc thing. Um, you chose to work for Ava Labs, of course. In the end, you said it was a little bit of a homecoming. Why would other people want to join Ava Labs? Like, what do you tell them when you approach them?
So I think that the blockchain Web3 industry has a very unique culture about it that you can't really quite replicate in any other space. And I think the easiest way for me to kind of give an analogy to it is it's very similar to how the gaming space operates. In early stage like gaming startups and these small tight knit companies, like everybody's of a similar mindset. They have similar goals. They rally behind the product, the project, and the founders, and they are all, for the most part, at least on the same page and kind of believe in the same goal. And there's not many industries where you have that. At some companies, um, people would be very happy to just like get a pay raise, and they wouldn't care what they're working for, what they actually do. Whereas in like the blockchain Web3 industry, people are very passionate about their product, even if they're not directly working on it and influenced by it. And so that's why I kind of give it like the gaming space. So from a culture standpoint, you'd be working with very like-minded people for the most part if you're into this sort of thing.
That's very
Also,
interesting.
working at Ava Labs specifically has a specific feel compared to like, let's say, a Coinbase or a Kraken. Those are much larger exchanges, and they're much larger companies. We are technically like a post-Series A startup. So in size, we're about 200-ish right now. When I started about 8, 9 months ago, we were at a little less than 100. So we've doubled in size since I've been here. And we're still going through a lot of typical growing pains like that Steve Jobs like move fast and break things. Like that's kind of the mode that we're in. And that life isn't for everyone, but the people that are attuned and ready for that startup life really do like it. So it does take a very different person. Like there's a different person that does the FANG circuit and goes and works at like your Facebook, your Amazon, your Apple. And then there are people that like to go work at like early stage startups and really enjoy that. So that's a selling point, whereas also sometimes it is a reason to not work for us or a company like us. But that mixed with our culture creates a very unique and vibrant place for a very tight knit community. It's awesome. I love it.
I would love to hear more about the culture, but I'm also very curious because you mentioned that within Web3, people really need to believe in the product before they kind of join a company. Does it mean that part of your job is convincing developers or whoever you talk to that about the Avalanche proposition, essentially about the product?
Yeah, so that's it's a very big part of my job, at least for the people that aren't like already Avalanche maxis or haven't really heard of our chain. I've gone to quite a few conferences and places where not even everyone knows about Avalanche, let alone knows about every single project within our ecosystem. So getting people hyped and jazzed, like I need to be able to at least do like high level technical overviews about like what our core tech is, like what it really does, why we're different, and what we're doing to like invest back into our ecosystem and our community. So sometimes, depending on like the level of depth a candidate has, like my calls with everybody looks very different. Sometimes it's a lot more of me explaining, seeing if they'll still be interested. And a lot of times it's more them talking and me kind of finding more about their background. But that's usually why I schedule like a 15 to 30 minute buffer sometimes in between calls, because I try to make sure that I've planned for like overages.
Yeah, I don't like back-to-back calls either, so I respect that. Um, just because you mentioned it, like you have so many different like kind of conversations with people. Have you interviewed anyone? And it can be anonymous, of course. That maybe people in the Avalanche ecosystem know that like interesting like story about it, or so that was a really interesting conversation, or
So I've spoken with a lot of people that have come from like your very typical like FANG companies, that you would never know that they're very interested in Web3. And I'm thinking of one person specifically right now, and he's a higher level leadership at one of those companies, and he is like one of the core founders of Fingerprints DAO, probably one of the more prolific like NFT organizations in the space. He was like an insider for Bored Apes, for like Moonbirds, Doodles, like the early investor in a lot of these projects. Like he owns a Beeple. Like he's just like actually a crazy individual, but he doesn't like actually advertise any of this. So it's kind of cool when you can find like these little hidden gems throughout the community. And that's also another reason why being a recruiter in Web3 is very hard, is not everyone advertises their experience in crypto and what they do in their hobbies. People don't post that on LinkedIn, and they don't post that on like job websites. You can't find that out usually in GitHub unless they're contributing to a specific open source project. So it's always fun for me to be able to find out like, oh wow, you're kind of like one of us the whole time and I didn't know. So that's always really cool for me.
that's so interesting. I want to get back as well and like the resume part later. But first, I want to quickly go back to what you mentioned earlier, the culture at Ava Labs, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about like, what it's like to work for Ava Labs as a company.
So it's funny because I think for anyone that like is looking for a culture, like you always want to speak to a recruiter because we work with so many different teams. Since I've been here, I've worked with four major different teams that stretch out through different parts of the organization. And right now, I'm working mostly with engineering, but I've worked with business development. I've worked with our marketing side as well as our office of the COO. So I've definitely kind of like run the gamut, as well as legal and finance. So I've kind of seen like all the different departments and how they act, and every one of them is a little bit different. So it's very hard to kind of just put your hand on the culture, and that'll usually come from like, where did these people come from, that sort of thing. But I would say the like core common culture and what it's like to work here is everyone is very open and communicative, and everyone's always like ready for feedback, and they're always ready to push forward. Like we have a insanely high bar of expectations for everyone that we bring on. So everyone's like a true subject matter expert in their own way. And sometimes it's kind of intimidating when you're talking to someone, you're like, wow, like I didn't realize, like I didn't even touch the surface of this specific subject, and they're able to just like go into it way deeper. So that's really cool, like a lot of learning that is still going on, but everyone's really growing together. I mean, like a lot of these people, you can say you're an OG if you've been here for a year because the company's still so new. And everyone kind of has that like family, like community type sense, which is lost on larger companies, but I feel like we still have that, and pretty evident like by Avalanche House, like everyone was really excited.
Is there any risk of like Ava Labs losing that if it hires more people, if it keeps on growing at the rate it does right now?
I think that's a risk for any company that once you hit a certain point, like, and I think that certain point is usually around 1,000. Like once you kind of hit that point, it's very hard to really just go back, just because teams are so large. But I still think it's very easy to keep a cultural identity overall, and then it more becomes like a departmental identity. And I think we're already starting to see that. Like our business development team has its own identity. They almost function like their own company sometimes. And our engineering team has a very specific identity. So I already see that happening, but it's more not a divergence from it. It's more of like a branching off and becomes like a subset if it's done right.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, as soon as people cannot know all their colleagues anymore, you can kind of get groups in a way.
Exactly.
And then it's up to leadership, I guess, to set the culture. And
it's definitely like leadership, but also a lot of recruiting, because leadership like kind of communicates that to recruiting, and that's some of the things that we look for when we're hiring is that culture fit. Like a lot of people will say like not a culture fit. That's a very big like hiring like lingo, but it's something that is actually like very important, because when you have a small team of like 10 to 15, one bad egg can really ruin morale. So we always try to make sure that we're getting the right people in.
That's very interesting, and I do want to get a little bit deeper into like more concretely for people who may want to work at Ava Labs. So I think that's definitely a topic we'll touch on. But maybe first of all, like what are the kind of people that you're looking for at Ava Labs?
So I would say this is the early stage startup speaking. So unless it is specifically implied in the role where it says like a junior level role, we usually hire at the mid to senior level for most roles. And the reason for that is in an early stage startup, everything's very lean. So instead of like a larger company like Coinbase, where their engineering team is hundreds, like our whole company is about 200. So our engineering teams, everything's a lot smaller, a lot leaner. Managers are more hands-on, like they might actually be doing coding if they're an engineer. We don't have a lot of like people managers at this point in time, just because of the amount of work that is to be done and the size of our company. And if you scale too fast, like that's when you get a lot of problems. So for any of our roles, like I feel like getting someone that's a subject matter expert on like Web3 blockchain, if the role entails that, is always going to be good, but it's always a huge plus as well, because not having to explain like how this is going to affect our company or how their job like kind of pertains to everything, they just get a better overall picture. And I would also say that we are always looking for people that are builders. And the reason I specifically say that is there's a lot of people that wanted to get into Web3 and blockchain when it was a bull market. But when it's a bear market and things aren't going okay, those are sometimes the people that are the first to leave. So we have to try and filter out those people that are just in it for the ride, and the people that actually believe in the tech and believe in the future. Because those are the people that end up being rewarded and want to stay long term. So like from an high level overview, without saying like a specific role, that's what we are looking for.
A little bit more into like the role part. I think I've scrolled the website just now. I think a lot of the roles you're looking for are in engineering, with like a couple of roles in marketing, product, and some other department. Is that like about the normal ratio? Is it like an engineering focus still?
It ebbs and flows actually. So the first and second quarter of this year, I hired, I think, about 16 to 18 business development roles. This was including like directors, associates, senior associates, a lead. We hired finance, we hired legal, a lot of marketing, social media as well. So it kind of depends on the month and who is currently like about to focus with their road mapping. And then that's more of like an internal thing. Right now we're doing a very large engineering push, and that's like what we have like coming up is another very large engineering push. So that's probably where our resources are going to be allocated. But there will always be a mix. It's more of just like, for example, if we're doing marketing, it's because we're doing a marketing push. Business development, it's usually like new growth. We haven't had many fall offs where people have like left the company, so we're not really backfilling jobs. So when people like get hired for their job, like unless the team is expanding, we're not hiring for them again at this point in time. So that's why you're seeing a lot of like new random positions. Is it's a lot of new teams are actually being built right now. So it's really hard for us to forecast like what's going to come out. It's really based on like the managers and their needs and like overall leadership.
Awesome. And then I want to get back to something you mentioned earlier before. You mentioned that people kind of keep their Web3 identities and their work identities separate. I mean, I've done the same thing. And then you mentioned that like you kind of find that out only in like when you interview people, kind of. So I'm curious, like, what do you pay the most attention to when you select candidates to move along in the process?
So the first thing is always going to be like relevant skill set. A lot of the roles that we have open specifically right now are very niche skill set. Like I actually made a tweet recently that I hired a role that I've been working on for 7.5 weeks,
I saw it, yeah.
which was a lead institutional wallet engineer role, doing like institutional self custody. There's maybe like 10 to 15 like major companies that are doing that right now. So that means there's maybe 1 to 3 people at a lead to architect level that know how to implement that. So maybe 30 to 45 people that are really qualified in the world to do this at an L1. And I spent the last 7.5 weeks trying to get one of them. So sometimes it comes down to very like strict search parameters. The other times it is a culture fit. So we have an infrastructure engineer role that we're hiring right now. And this is not a very like Web3 like crypto oriented role. Like you could have been like an SRE or a DevOps engineer at another company and come into this role pretty well. But I like seeing that sense of curiosity and that sense of passion whenever I'm interviewing with someone. Like you can immediately tell when someone's just like, this is just another job for me, or they're actually genuinely interested in the tech. And usually it's those people that are genuinely interested and curious they make the better hires because they're more willing to listen. They're more willing to like delve into the product. Whereas there are some people that do just treat it as like a normal 9 to 5 job instead of a career and a potential like future. Like these are the people that it's been a year and a half to 2 years since my last job, like might start looking now. So
Gotcha, yeah.
we try and look for people that, like I said, are those builders or at least have that builder mindset. Like they don't even have to be crypto native specifically, but we want someone that's at least passionate and willing to learn.
Yeah. And when you mentioned the institutional wallet engineer, I think that sounds like it was more of a headhunting exercise, right?
Yeah,
It's
that
like
was
you reaching out to people. But of course, you've also got people coming in via the website. They submit, like, what do they have to submit? First of all, I think it's a resume and a cover letter.
For most roles, it is actually only a resume. The only roles that I had a cover letter like guaranteed that we really needed it was when I was doing business development associates, and that's because we were getting on average probably 300 to 400 applicants per week for business development associates, and this was worldwide. So we needed to come up with more restrictions. And the first restriction I put on it was unless you had something Web3 or crypto specific, because this is a very Web3 crypto specific job. unless you had that in your job or you had a cover letter, you're out. It's just because there's physically not enough time in the day for me to speak to all of these people. Like, it would have taken my whole job. That's only a part of my job. So we have to come up with creative ways like that. And I try and tweet about it, try and tell people like, hey, write a cover letter, please. Like, you'll help me out. You'll help you out. So we took that down. And then after that, we cut off the people that basically like had no like front end office or sales experience, or like even like similar experience. So people that were coming from more like engineering backgrounds. We wanted people obviously for business development that had more of like a sales, maybe venture cap background, worked in TradFi, like any type of like customer experience, like where they've actually had to work with vendors or anything like that. So we had to keep like narrowing it down, and we basically ended up narrowing it down to about 150 people. Like, I interviewed 150 people in like 3 weeks, which is absolutely insane. I'm actually the reason that I broke our old calendar system that we had for recruiting. We used to have a shared calendar, and I actually broke our shared calendar because I was putting so many meetings on it. And now we have our own separate calendars and no shared calendar for recruiting anymore. So awesome. That's kind of a little funny anecdote, but I personally love cover letters for roles that are crypto specific, because a cover letter is where you tell about you, and you tell about like your Web3 identity and your experience. And a lot of people don't know how to transition that into a regular resume, which is fine. Like, I don't expect everyone to be a resume writer. I'm pretty lenient actually on resumes. Like, I get some pretty awful ones and they still interview. I usually try and see through it. But resumes are like that gateway into like what your like passion is, because you don't want to write on your resume like, I'm really interested in this. Like, that's where you do it on your cover letter. So I also love when people like link their websites, if they link their portfolio, especially like we had an NFT position. If you linked your NFT portfolio, like, you automatically were getting interviewed because you have NFTs and like you're trying to get hired for an NFT role.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of it's a big thing for me. Like, and so for education, like, for some roles it's more important than others, but what I will say is an impressive education background will always be looked at.
So, and what counts as impressive? Like the good universities?
Yeah, like a top 20 university for whatever degree you got is noticed, because we have a list of all those top universities for specific degrees. And so we're like, oh, yeah, they were at MIT for this. Like, cool. Like, this is automatically like more of a top tier candidate, just because we like know the alumni and we know how everything works over there. Extracurricular, I would say it's more like internships. Like, but we do, like, if you're part of the blockchain club, like, that shows initiative. Like, we have a few people on our teams that were like founders of their blockchain clubs. Joe Ferrara was the founder of the Cornell Blockchain Club, for example. So, and we also just hired Jeremy Hazan, who was formerly one of the leaders over at the Cornell Blockchain Club, and he kind of took it over from Joe. So we have like multiple people that come from those backgrounds. So extracurriculars, like, it's not a make or break, but like, it should be adding to it. Like, I don't just like throw like a collegiate sports athlete. Like, we like that stuff, but if anything that you're adding to a resume, whether it be like a cover letter, an intro paragraph, or like extracurriculars, or like anything, it should add, not take away from the overall resume.
So you're also saying a resume should be customized to the position you're applying for?
100%. Every single resume should be. Unless you're at the point of your career where you don't need a resume anymore and people just reach out to you, you should always be customizing your resume for every single position and for every single company. Like, if you applied to OpenSea and you applied to Ava Labs, it should be a relatively similar resume, but it should be different.
That's a great tip for the viewers, I think.
Yeah, no, it's something that it's only a few changes, but if you can target your audience, like you'll always get more flies with honey than vinegar. Like flattery is always accepted, and it's definitely like something you can get past at least one interview with.
Awesome. I also want to be conscious of time a little bit. We booked half an hour. We're getting close to that. I want to ask you, like, what are like things people can do to improve their chances when applying? Of course, you mentioned customize the resume. Is there any room for creativity or anything else they can do?
I think there is definitely room for creativity. Usually, what I would look at are trying to get like 70% of like the non-negotiables. Like, if you have experience with that, then I feel like you should apply. Usually, like the roles where you feel like, okay, like I would have been a fit for this if it wasn't in Web3, then you definitely should apply. I think it's hard when it comes to people that just want to get into a company any way they can, so they apply to everything. That is probably the worst way of improving your chances because you'll get marked as spam. Most of these companies will mark you as spam. You'll just get blacklisted from their system because their recruiters are tired of seeing your name. So the last thing you want to do is just apply to like 40 jobs. I would pick one or pick something that's very close to your skill set. And if you don't know the tools that job does, Google them, learn how to use them so that you can at least talk about them. Be like, hey, I haven't used X tool, but I've used Y. It's very similar. But because you Googled it beforehand, and you don't sound stupid when they ask you, have you used this? And you're like, I don't know what that is. There's a very different answer of being like, yeah, I've used something similar. And I'm very bright. I could pick it up probably in a day or two. Like, that's a very different like segue into a new conversation instead of saying like, I don't know. Like, the last thing you want to be doing in an interview is saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. It's more of, oh, I've done something similar. I've worked in a situation where I've had to do something like that, but I use this tool or I use this product to do it. Basically, like, also, if you could do research on the role and look at like other companies that are hiring for it, see what tools and what like recommendations they have, look them up. Like, if you can get an idea, let's say like community management. There's always like a very big misconception about like what community management is. And it's very similar like in crypto and the gaming industry. They think that someone that's talented with the people, is a good communicator, is going to make a good community manager. Community management really is like a marketing and social media management position. Like, you're making content calendars, learning how to use TweetDeck, like Agora Pulse, like all these different like actual like tools that you have to use because you're managing content calendars and you're making sure that everything is on brand. Like, you have a style guide that you have to go by. Especially if you're a community manager in like gaming or like Web3, like, you're sometimes working with the developers and you're the punching bag. Like, you're giving announcements and you're giving feedback, but at the same time, like, you're not an advocate for the community. Like, you're the mouthpiece for the company. Yeah. So there's like a very big difference, and there's a misconstrued like opinion of it. And like, usually like a strong community manager comes from like a writing background. Like, I've hired a lot of writers that used to work at like Polygon or something like that to be community managers because they're used to writing and they're very eloquent with what they can do, and they can make a quip on the fly or something like that. But at the same time, like, they can push out content and they can make sure that the community is appeased in between updates. I think Bungie, for example, does a really good job with that. They're a video game company, and they have every Thursday, it's called This Week at Bungie. And it's like an article that they post for the community every week. But that's like what a community manager does, is they give those updates and they kind of like link the two. So I think getting like a fundamental understanding of like what the job actually is would just do wonders for so many people. Like, just Google it. I swear, and like, if you learn some of these skills, like, they're much more attainable than people think.
Well, some things, of course, you want to do them like in a other corporate setting, like you want to get the actual experience, which is harder than learning a new tool. Maybe, I don't know. Well, not in all cases. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if you have an opinion on that.
No, it's definitely hard. It's one of those things where I've told a lot of people this, and it's basically don't get discouraged, especially if you're like targeting Ava Labs for a job. Like we're very small, we're a very lean team, and if they don't have experience prior to working in that position at Ava Labs, like it's going to be significantly harder. But the cool thing about Web3 and about like this industry is there are so many projects within our ecosystem getting grants from us, and they're starting up, and all you have to do is help part time, like maybe even just start learning the tools for one of those projects, and they hit it big, and then you have a job. Like I was talking with a community manager from Trader Joe and Getty Finance when I was at Avalanche House, and he did the exact same thing. Like he was just a Discord mod for them, like hanging out, being a cool guy, and now he has an actual job working for them because they took off. And I've seen a lot of stories like that, and so that's why I kind of tell people like get involved with the projects that you like. It doesn't have to just be the L1, because the L1s are the only companies right now that have like a lot of public eye on them, and a lot of these other projects don't right now, and they're still like rabid for people, and they're always hiring. Like one of my big things I'm doing right now is like an ecosystem like job board initiative to help with hiring for them.
Yeah, I saw that.
So
It's a
it
Telegram
definitely
channel, right?
that's actually one of them. We're actually making a private Discord channel, and we're gonna have a an actual like job board landing site connected to the main Ava Labs site pretty soon. So that's spitting some alpha right there. But that's stuff that I'm actively working on because that's all me.
I'll put the Telegram link in the description at least. If the Discord will have a link, I can try and update it once it's live. But you said private, so I'm not sure.
So that one is actually a little bit different. The Telegram would be awesome to link. Would love to get more eyes on that. The Discord is actually internal candidates from Ava Labs that either couldn't get through our interview process fast enough, like didn't match up at the time. Something may have gone wrong through the process, but they're still interested in working for our ecosystem. So it's our way of like filtering some of our really good candidates that we liked and we've already screened and wanted to hire into our ecosystem. So that's a new way that we're doing it. But that's basically kind of just holding everything off until we're ready for like our big job board push.
It's about keeping the talent in the community, even if Ava Labs.
Exactly.
Awesome.
That is exactly what it is. The rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly. I want to ask you one final question before we call it, and that's what would you say to people who have applied to Ava Labs in the past unsuccessfully? Like, what should they do now if they're still enthusiastic about working for Ava Labs?
It's a two-part question, so I've actually been thinking about this a lot. One, it could have 100% been wrong timing. Like, and there are a few people on our teams that I've specifically hired. Will Patterson on our gaming team, for example, he had applied before, and someone else got hired before him. It's just they went through the process quicker. He was on vacation. We had a week and a half lull. Someone else ended up getting the position. And I always tell people, like, we have your information on file. Like, we will reach back out. And sometimes people feel like that's a very empty saying, like, oh, don't call us, we'll call you. I called him back 2 weeks later, and it's like, hey, we have a new role that's on our gaming team this time. Are you interested? And he was hired by the end of that week.
Wow.
So, like,
we can move fast.
We can move very fast if we need to, and if the time like permits, depending on the role. So sometimes it's really timing. When we have, especially like our junior to mid-level roles that are a little bit more openly accessible to the community, we get a high volume of applications, so we tend to move very fast with them. Like most of those roles get filled within less than 2 to 3 weeks. So unless you have like alerts set up, like you apply on week 3, like you're probably not going to get into it. So timing is always like a key. I would always say like look at the job board website, like follow me on LinkedIn. Like I always post on there, and I also post on Twitter like when we have a new hot job that we're working on. Especially ones that are more accessible to the community. And then also to the other people, like there's quite a few people in the community that have reached out personally and like helped them redo their resumes. I've shown them tools. And the community manager position it's stuck in my mind because that was the one I was talking about specifically with this person. And I say like it's very similar to like what I was told. So to go into a small anecdote. When I first got into recruiting, before I even got into recruiting, I wanted to go work for Riot Games and go work for a video game company, work on my favorite game, League of Legends.
Yeah.
And I got to a final round interview to be in esports coordination because I love the esports tournaments. That's my jam. And they declined me and told me like, hey, you don't have any experience, but you'd be a really good recruiter. And 2 weeks later, I had a recruiting job. I quit my job. I worked in recruiting, and I've been doing that for like 7 years now. And in that meantime, like I've worked in the gaming industry. Like I've actually now declined offers from Riot Games. So like
Oh, wow.
it's a different tale now. But I basically tell people, like, especially if you're early in your career, like it's not always like the end goal, it's the journey to the goal. And if you can continuously level yourself up, become a subject matter expert, you'll get to the point in the space where people can't ignore you. And once you get to that point, then you can decide what you want to do. And it's always hard starting off from the beginning. But if you keep building yourself, keep leveling up your own game, that, as well as like making sure you're prepared when the time is right and you have that timing, like that's really what it is. Like luck is just preparation and correct timing. That's really how I see it, at least.
I believe that, yes.
So yeah.
Sorry, I thought I interrupted you. Well, thank you so much. I think that's pretty much all we have time for, and it's answered most of my questions. So again, thank you so very much for being here. I think I found it very interesting. I think the people who will watch it later will find it very interesting. Is there any last tips or comments that you want to leave the viewers with?
Yes. So I would always say that the best thing that you can do when you're reaching out to a recruiter at any company is don't ask them, what position do you have for me? I would usually have already gone on the website, found a role, and be like, hey, I'm interested in this role and this role because of XYZ reasons. Would I be a good fit for this? Should I apply? You'll get so much good information from that. And recruiters, like, they really just want to hire for the role. And if you could make their job easier, like, you're going to go far. Like, if you come in with a plan and you come prepared, like, you're going to be able to do whatever you want eventually.
That's a great tip. Well, thank you so much, Dani. We'll be seeing you around on Twitter. I think we'll leave your Twitter handle down as well, together with the link to the Telegram web board or job board and the Ava Labs career page. To anyone watching, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one. And that's it. Goodbye.
Oh, all right.